Okay.
All right.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Brain Builders Book Club hosted by the Neuroplasticity Alliance. I am so excited to discuss this book today. It is February, it is the month of love, and this book is we selected this especially for February and those conversations. I um I am almost 60 years old, and I will tell you I learned so much about my body and my sexual experience through life and how that connection with my body and my brain really worked to give me those experiences. And so I'm very excited to discuss this book. Izzy, how did you find the book?
I thought it was really refreshing because it did talk so much more about, one, normalizing everything. I feel like that conversation isn't had a whole lot. And this was very different than the majority of like sex ed books or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was much more about the experience and the nervous system and the brain and just looking at it from a stress response and just it was beautifully put. It was a great walkthrough. I loved the stories, the examples, that it made it so practical. I will say though, don't read the book in public. I did that. I went to a restaurant and I was like, oh, while I'm eating lunch and I'll open the book. There are diagrams in the book, so don't do that.
Yes, and that is funny you said that because the book comes with a workbook, and I really used the workbook. I actually took advantage of it and bought that at the same time. And I had that workbook, and I actually was at the park with the dog, and just it was the dog park, and so people are very friendly. And so I'm sitting there working on the workbook, and up comes somebody. It's like, oh, what? Tell me about what you're reading. And so it does create a lot of attention and opens up the conversation. So
It did. Yeah, I was talking about this book with my friends, and it was bringing up great conversation, and it was again normalizing, which was part of the point of the book too.
yeah, and I guess that's kind of well, actually, let me go back before we get started into that. I'm eager to jump in, but I did want to thank you for joining us today. And while we're going to talk about the Come As You Are book by Emily Nagoski today. The next books up are The Brain at Rest by Joseph Jabelli and Why Brains Need Friends by Ben Rhine. So I these two coming up books that are coming up are very different than what we have read before. We've been learning about neuroplasticity. We're learning about how to connect your brain with your body to enable you to accomplish what you want to in life. And I think the book today is a little bit about that as well. But the two books coming up are about how you can minimize your input from and use social interaction to put your brain at rest so that it can do the work it needs to do to consolidate all of the information you're learning and make that accessible as you go through life. So we will be switching gears a little bit as we move forward, and I'm really excited to read these books. It's based on some very new research out there, and I'm excited to learn about them. I haven't read them myself, so I'll get started on The Brain at Rest today, actually.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people do make reading books or self-educating a New Year's resolution, and I think it's a great one. You can learn so much by just reading the books, but really where it begins to integrate into the mind and putting it at play is when we get to talk about it. So,
Yeah.
you can do an audiobook, you can do the physical book, but just starting to read or to listen and to start to grow your experiences in that way.
Okay, yes. So I am looking forward to what I can learn out of those and discussion around that, Izzy. So you're so right. You can read it, but and really that's a key component of neuroplasticity, reflecting on what you've learned, right? That's sort of the fourth step. And these conversations help cement that so that you can apply it and use it and leverage it. We are going to move then now into the next conversation. Marilyn and Shannon, thank you guys both for joining. Please jump in anytime you have a question. And I guess I wanted to start by, just kind of reflecting on what I really loved about this book, because as you said, Izzy, it's a very unique perspective on a discussion around your sexual health and your preferences. And what I really found so much about this book is this first bullet. It validated my personal experiences throughout life's stages, because each of the couples that she referred to in the book, that she sort of shared their stories. I don't know if you picked up on that, but they were at very different stages of their
Mhm.
life, right?
Yeah.
So all the way from your very first sexual experiences to couples who've been married for many, many years. And I really felt like this book helped me understand what I was feeling back when I had little kids running around and why there was no desire, and helped me understand those how I can modify those accelerators. And as I go forward in life, as life really changes and you're into the phase of you've been with your partner, luckily for me, for so many years, 30, almost 30 years, and how to keep that fresh and exciting. So I really love that perspective of it. And then, of course, the second bullet here, her quote, it was this, I think this was in the last chapter of the book, and it really just cemented it for me that orgasms happen to be in your brain and not your genitals. I stopped my treadmill and wrote it down when I got to that quote. Did you pay attention to that quote? Did it catch you, Izzy?
Oh, it totally did. And like I totally read all the cliff notes before reading the book because I was like, what am I getting myself into? Uh, and I really loved that that was the perspective. And that was, I think, one of the main reasons I really started talking about it with my friends. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is such a different take on it. Because I have noticed that with conversations with other friends in the past, where some of my friends, again, like as you mentioned, Sherry, when you've got kids running around and there's just no desire. And I see so many of my friends getting divorces after the baby's like 3 years old because
Yeah.
it's typically there's a lack of that type of intimacy that's happening because the moms are just they're frazzled. They don't feel like they've gotten a break. There's no way that they can get themselves into that mood. And it is very much the nervous system and the brain that's at play. So I loved sharing this with them and be like, oh, hey, it's happening in the brain. Science is showing it. It's not something's not wrong with your body.
Yeah, and I was your thoughts are the first things that come into play here, how you think about that, right? And when all that's busy and you're so worried about trying to get dinner on the table, get the books read to put the kids to bed, and then I've got to go back to do another 2 hours worth of work, that being intimate with your partner is the very last thing on your mind, and how you think about that though, it's a task versus a way to
Yeah.
bring joy into your life. I just like that so demonstrates the connection between mind and body there, and that how you think about is really the first step to add some bloom to your garden. And I loved her metaphors in this book.
Yes. Well, and it just really shows that, I mean, this book, although it's speaking to women and it's very much about women, it's a great book for your partners to read as well, for them to understand how much of it is needing, like, oh, I need to be able to turn off the go mode in order to be able to relax, to be able to enjoy.
Yeah, yeah. And then I did mention just a minute ago the workbook, and it is exceptional. If this is a book that you're really interested in putting into practice, I do recommend the workbook. That it's not often, quite frankly, I recommend a workbook
Yeah.
that goes along with it. I really feel like it's in many cases not that very helpful, but she put a lot of effort into it. Make sure you get the workbook that she wrote, because it really does go through what she recommends in the book and gives you ways to implement it and ask the right questions to help you think about it and put it into perspective, especially the part about the brakes and the accelerators, which I found extremely helpful. So I learned a lot. Like I said, I'm almost 60 years old and I was shocked by how much I learned. I've been recommending it to all my friends because of that.
Well, and I think that's such a good point too, is that, depending on where you grew up or when you grew up, could play a role in how much you were educated and how much you've been taught to like don't talk about those things. And really like making this a new norm it can be uncomfortable for people. And we even talked about that, like, oh, choosing this book is is this a good choice? But it did have to do with the brain. So it impacts a lot of people, and it's one of those unspoken topics.
Yeah, I did. You're right, because this is such a maybe, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but it can open up a lot of hot buttons and touch that for people. So I made sure that I read this book in advance to see if it was appropriate and how tied to the brain it really was. Did it illustrate our neuroplasticity components? And I will say it has changed a lot about my thoughts about how I talk to my daughter about sex as well. Thinking back, as you brought up, Izzy, how I was raised and how my parents communicated it to me, and we'll talk a little bit about that shame that comes with it.
Yeah.
That was a big part of my experience growing up, and I don't want that to be the case for my daughter. Um, yeah, so which kind of brings me, I guess, sort of to the next slide here, which is for me, it was the key number one key takeaway. And I think that depending on your frame of reference, you can find this as maybe the key takeaway, but there could also be the other one about whether it's normal for you, right? Am I normal? And I do think I struggled with kind of which of those two were the key takeaway for me, but I did end up going with this one because I had never really thought about it as analyzing and breaking down what those brakes were for me and those accelerators were for me and how I could use those to transform my sexual life, my garden, and help my garden bloom. Yeah, so the stress, she talks so much about the stress and the fatigue, especially as you're in that, with young kids, et cetera, because those are in and even in her examples with the younger couple that was in grad school, the stress, the cycles of stress and peaks around that. And I don't know. I just thought it would be interesting to ask the group here. Do you know what your accelerators and brakes are? Did you spend any time looking at that beforehand? Had you thought about it like that? Anybody want to share? If you do, just drop it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, and it was quite interesting. It made me reflect back on my first marriage versus where I am now. And that was the case. Like I had two kids that were both special needs. I was very stressed trying to figure out, but I think too, like understanding, allowing your partner to understand what your brakes are and what your accelerators are, you first have to identify them before you could share that. And for me back then, I was in my 20s. I didn't have the vocabulary or the knowledge to be able to vocalize that, to sit down and like, let's have an adult conversation. It was very much arguing of, I want it, I don't, and back and forth. And that can be a big stressor on a marriage. And it was. And so, now looking back, I'm like, oh gosh, I wish when I was 20, I had known these things, or any young moms, to be able to know these things. But that's not the only people that need it. I feel like women in general, I've had friends that they had a lot of religious connotations put on them around that, and so they very much associated in their brains shame with sex. And so even once they were married, they really struggled with that if it wasn't just to make babies. And
Yeah.
I've known several women who have had those issues.
Yeah, and I would put myself in that category as I was mentioning, early on. That's sort of my upbringing and how that affected my perspective of sex. And even to this day, as I was going through that workbook, it struck me that that was still in there. As much proactive work as I had personally done to address that, it was still a factor when I got down to the nitty gritty of what, what my brakes and accelerators
Yeah.
were. And which was shocking to me. Like I said, I'm 60 years old. How could that still be an issue? And I've been married for 30 years. But it's in there. And rewiring that is possible because those cues are emotional. Like,
Mhm.
back to that quote that, orgasm is in the brain and not in your body. How you feel about that is a cue, and you can rewire it with positive associations, just as you can rewire any other attitude.
Yeah, we
Uh,
had great comment too. Talking about what you've witnessed with your parents or even society, right? But in particular with your parents, like if you have associated as a child that there's something negative with that, that it's not safe, right? That's the same thing.
yeah.
Your brain is putting a brake on. It's going, whoa, that's not safe. Let's not do that. And you'll shut down.
Yeah, and I mean, I was looking at some of these comments, right? There's trauma that comes into play, and you look at how your association with that is. And she had a great example in the book of somebody, and even I think it was herself, that she had associated pain with pleasure as a
Hmm.
result of her experiences, and how she had to really rewire that herself. And kind of back to your point, Izzy, is you've got to be aware of what those are before you can address those. And I think that really is step one. Do you know
Hmm.
what your brakes and accelerators are? And if you can do that and look at that, and then back to her point of self-compassion, I think it really does set the stage for moving forward.
Yeah, and to that comment, like if you know that you regularly choose something because of past experience, then to journal more. Like that's a huge help. And if you can, if it's available, like having a group of people that you can talk about those things with, or a friend that you can talk about those things with, because they will point those things out to you, going, "Oh, you're doing that thing again." To be able to recognize those tendencies. And again, like after you have this conversation with your partner, hopefully, hopefully it inspires all of us to have that conversation. That you can also have, again, that accountability partner that can point it out, like, "Oh, hey, I noticed this. Like, how are you feeling?" And you can begin to talk about that.
Yeah, you have to be able to talk to your partner about it. And that kind of brings in that trust component,
Mhm.
which is why I was like, oh, let's move on to this next slide, because that context is crucial. And what you're dealing with there, and the research on this I thought was amazing, that arousal depends on safety, novelty, and environment. And your responsiveness of desire around that is a very common way to approach it. And you have to recognize, are you feeling safe? Is it something that it's exciting you? Is the environment that I am in conducive, right? Does that
Mhm.
promote and create desire? And I think, a lot of times couples just get into the same routine of it. And that novelty is extremely important, as she showed with so many different examples.
It is. It is. Well, and having those conversations with your partner is part of the intimacy. And it creates and signals that safety because if you don't feel safe to express what your desires are or your breaks are, then you're going to have a harder time being able to be intimate in that moment too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that this trust component is the key to that, being able to have that intimacy with your partner, and being able to talk about it. I think that's to me, when she was talking about the connection between trust and then the dopamine, that really resonated with me, because if you've got that trust, your heart is open and you're willing to accept what they're telling you and share without the judgment. It removes that judgment component to it. And one of the things she talked a lot about around sort of how to tackle those mismatches was fun. That really resonated with me, and setting time aside with your partner. I mean, we've
Mhm.
all heard of date nights. I mean, how many people have not set up date nights, right? But there tends to be so much stress, I think, around it a lot of
Mhm.
ways because you've now created this event, you've spent the money to go put it into play. You've gotten a sitter if you've got kids, or you've made, these arrangements, and that creates expectation.
Mhm. Yeah, and I have known people in the past that they have literally scheduled which nights each week that they are available to have sex together. And I thought those were really interesting. Uh, I've also known I did this seminar one time with another person, and they were talking about how to make sure that you're not complaining all week and to schedule complain time together, but make sure that you're not scheduling it on the same day as a date night or time to spend quality time with each other. But maybe scheduling time each week to just talk, to write down all your things all from the week that have come up, and then just to sit down and talk with each other. That can be far more intimate than a date night.
Yeah. Yeah. I do. I thank you for bringing that up, Izzy, because I do think that that is extremely important. And I liked, when she was talking about, setting boundaries for not having sex,
Yeah.
and putting that into play as part of the creation for desire, and how effective that was. I mean, there were two different couples who put that into play, and how it really created that uh, the ability to take that expectation out, and the dopamine comes from that connection versus the physical desire.
Yeah. Well, and having the safety to say no, right?
Yeah,
And know that you're not going to be punished or penalized for it.
yeah. And that acceptance around it. Yeah, good
Mhm.
point. So the next takeaway was this genital non-concordance. She made a big deal out of this in the book, right? A lot of conversation around it. And at first, I was like, that doesn't, that seems pretty normal to me, but that's to me. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much that is important. Because especially, and where it came into play for me personally is mentally, right? I might think about that, but physically, I'm not interested because I've got so much other stuff going on. And I feel like that needs to be prioritized. So I really
Mhm.
stepped back and thought about this and I really appreciated how she put it as an evolutionary
Mhm.
reflex, and not as not as a concordance with desire. So I actually went back and looked at the research on this in a little bit more detail, and found that it was very enlightening for me on what causes it, what doesn't cause it, and how to bring it into concordance. I guess that was the
Mhm.
other thing, back to this your autonomic
Yes.
system, and how to rewire it so that it becomes concordant. And the takeaway for me and all of that additional research was it starts in your brain and how you're thinking about it.
Yep. And well, perspective, right? When we change our mind or change our view about something, our perspective changes and the whole thing can change based on our perspective. And
Yeah.
everybody's going to have a different perspective on it. Might be similar, but it's rarely exactly the same. And reading stuff like this, having the education can help change your perspective so that you see it differently. And when you see it differently, you're going to have an different emotional response to it as well.
Yeah, so true. The very first part of the book is kind of to this last bullet here of overcoming frustration, and how you do that. And the very first part of the book, she brings it up throughout, but it's like, go stand in front of the mirror naked and look at yourself. Really appreciate your body. And I couldn't help but think about Catherine O'Hara's famous line in Schitt's Creek, if you guys know that story at all. But she's telling her daughter to, go take nude pictures of herself now at 23, because when she gets to be 50, no matter what age you are, you don't think, you may have this lack of appreciation for your beauty. And so go take photos of yourself now, because when you get to be 20 years older, regardless of what that age is, you're going to think your body, 10, 15 years ago
Yep.
was absolutely gorgeous. And that was Catherine O'Hara's comment. And I do, she passed this week, and she's one of my favorite actresses, and because she just brings so much humor into all of her conversations. And so I don't know, that became, I associated that with this bullet point and thinking about your body. You have to love your body to be able to enjoy sex and let your garden bloom. There is just no way around it to be able to reach that full potential.
It's so true. Well, so many of us are self-critical, right? We're like, oh, how could he or she like me? Like, I'm not attractive, or, you don't have to find yourself attractive to allow someone else to find you attractive. But it works even better if you do also appreciate your own body. But it is part of that allowing yourself to believe you're attractive to someone else, even. I went through a little program like that, and after I had babies, stretch marks and different body shape, and I was super self-critical. And there's this whole exercise of like loving on your body and like holding your belly and being like, yes, this belly made babies, and seeing it from a different perspective. It also helps to just like talk with other people and realize like, hey, sometimes people do like a little plushy belly, and sometimes people find that attractive, or just have your other girlfriends even go, you look gorgeous. What are you talking about? To not just be in your own mind about all of that.
Yeah, I really felt she addressed this beautifully in, one of those couple stories where the woman had had babies and she didn't like her body afterwards. And she thought, her husband didn't appreciate it. And it turned out completely the opposite. He loved her even more because there was that connection that they had. And
Mhm.
he not only saw her then as this, how he saw her before they got married and loving her body that way, but now because it created this lovely family and they have this shared experience. And when he looked at her, that's what he saw. And she didn't see that. She was disapproving of her body. And him sharing that with her helped her then accept her body and love herself more, which I thought that was so fantastic, because
Mhm.
there are very few women on this planet who go through that
Yeah.
experience and not come out of it thinking like that. Oh, I wish I had my 25-year-old body back. I wish I had my pre-baby body back. And while I do think what her recommendations are is a difficult step for somebody, I don't think you have to go all the way to the point of standing in front of the mirror nude on a regular basis to come to love yourself. It can be gradual, right? I do
Mhm.
think that her recommendation is the end goal, because if you can get to that, you
Yeah.
do love yourself. But you can just start, start at a place. Look at your thighs, look at your arms, and look at your face and your chest, and love your body.
Mhm.
I really felt like her she kept driving on that point and kept driving on that point, and towards the end of the book, I really appreciated that perspective more and more.
Yeah.
You've got to do it or you don't cross the threshold.
Well, and your body's a product of your life, right? Like it's the experiences you've gone through. It might be part of your mindset. It might be part of your daily habits. And it's one of those like realizing what you can and can't change, and loving what you can't change, and making effort towards the things that you can.
Yeah, love where you are, and then you're happy. And you can't find the joy. I think that's how she talked about it at the end of the book, is you can't really release and lean into the joy until you release that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agree. I
Okay.
agree.
Let's see what is next on this slide deck. Um, okay, and I think this is, we talked about this a lot, the self-compassion and stress management and just loving yourself and getting rid of all of the shame that's associated with that, and your kind, being kind to yourself and that self-talk. We talked a lot about this in the last book with well, no, it wasn't the last book, it was the book with Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
And yeah, how to change your mind. And that was a very key component, right? Love yourself, talk to yourself kindly.
Yep. I mean, shame and guilt, those are things that will bring people down faster than anything else. And it keeps us down. And so the more work we can do to release the feelings of shame or guilt, the happier we will be.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, back to your point earlier, is you've got to be able to realize that that's what's driving you,
Yeah.
that's part of your brake system with regards.
Well, I love this last point. So, and hopefully he watches this. I had a doctor friend, we would talk about hypnotherapy and like all the cognitive change, behavioral change stuff. And he goes, I hear yoga teachers have the best orgasms. And I was like, whoa. He just kind of threw me back, and I was like, well, I guess they would, yeah, because they're practicing being in the moment more. They're practicing releasing any negative feelings more. You typically are just on that journey. And meditation and yoga, I will say, have gotten me through a lot of stressful times in life. It got me through college. Still, every time I get stressed, I'm like, "Ooh, when was the last time I meditated?" And cognitive behavioral therapy, like that's one of my specialties. I love it because it's all about changing the behavior and how we get to that change. And the first thing that starts with change is wanting to change.
Yeah, yeah. And the yoga is you're so in tune with your body, right? It's
Yeah.
that mind-body connection component again that you just can uh you're so much more sensitive to the pleasure component of it. So
Yeah.
I do agree that there is a connection there.
About body
And
awareness. Body awareness,
yeah,
that's a big thing.
but yeah, body awareness. Um, and back to, I guess, sort of the rewiring, right? So it's how do you get to the point where you're appreciating yourself, and how are you getting to the point where you're reducing the stress associated with that? And it is that yoga, that meditation, that mindfulness, whatever your practice
Yeah.
is, right? It could be hobbies that help you release that cycle of stress. And that's a really another very good point, I think, that she brought up in this book, and kept referring to, was how the cycle of stress has to release and complete
Yep.
before you can move forward. And I would say I haven't given that enough thought as a cycle. I mean, intuitively, it feels good. You've got to get over it. So I usually just go exercise or meditate, one of the two. But sometimes, I like to do watercolor, and I will go do some watercolor to calm myself. And that's what I'm doing. I'm releasing that cycle of stress, and being aware to know where you're at in that space, or that cycle of stress, opens you up to, will remove those brakes, right? And opens you up then
Yep.
to let those accelerators come through.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because remembering that stress releases a chemical, like it is a chemical experience in the body. And often when we are sitting and stressing, those chemicals don't have anywhere to go. So movement, whether it be a gentle movement, watercolors, right? Journaling, walking is a great exercise to do. It could be yoga, it could be water aerobics, like whatever it is, but finding some type of way to move those chemicals so that they can flush out of your body. And I've even like doing more of this like Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, just tapping the
The
body.
tapping.
That can be really helpful as well.
Yeah, let's hear from the group. Are there certain activities that you guys use to release your stress cycle? What are some of the things that you enjoy doing?
I'm super curious. I was super stressed at one point. It was right as the beginning of a divorce was taking place, and my first instinct was to go walk in the forest. And I walked and walked, and I was probably walking for three hours. And it was right towards the end that I finally just felt, whew, okay, everything has left the body. I feel better now.
Yeah.
And so it can be that as simple as that.
And it can be very simple. Watching, I will say, anybody who knows me as my friend knows I love TikTok, and I know that everybody's going to be like, "What?" But I love TikTok, and it is that 15 minutes of scrolling because I my feed is like silly animal videos and things like that because it just makes me laugh, and that is my go-to for if I just need 5 minutes to scroll on TikTok and laugh, and that is another
Laughter,
quick
laughter is
fix.
a great thing to move it through too, because you're giving yourself that dopamine hit. Not saying it like it's a quick fix, right? But I've seen studies on laughter, like someone they did went to a comedy show before, and another group went to watch a boring lecture. And then they ate afterwards. And the insulin levels were lower for those who were laughing versus
Yeah.
those who were sitting and just being bored because laughter is an exercise. I mean, you're engaging your muscles.
hmm Yeah, and if you think that and put that in perspective with, your partner and trying to build that connection and that trust, that laughter together is there's a lot of research out there that
Mhm.
shows that is something that really unlocks the doors for intimacy.
Connection. Yeah, connection in general. Like even your friends, you go laugh together, you're gonna feel closer to each other.
Yeah. So I would say this is probably the last. I think this is the last takeaway that all bodies are normal, and like I said at the very beginning of the conversation, this was one of the top takeaways for me, and it seems intuitive, right? That all bodies are normal, but and it's the same parts and pieces to quote her, they're just put together in a little bit of a different way, right? Your body is different than mine, but it's made of the same materials. It's the
Mhm.
same things. They might just be organized a little bit differently. And to know that about yourself will help you normalize your love and appreciation for your body. And I found her conversation around how orgasms vary hilarious. I never really stopped and thought about how other people are, you know, how they're experiencing orgasm, right? That's not something I have thought about. But if I take that information that I got through that and then reflect on it in my life, it totally applies. They're not all normal, and you just have to appreciate what it is and understand why it's different. And if you want something different, then you got to put in the work and the effort to get there.
Isn't that funny though? Like ironic that, for some of us we're like, oh, everyone else's must be just like mine. Or then there's this other group of people that are like, mine's weird. I don't know. Something's wrong with me. And it's interesting how we will instinctively go into one pattern. And then of course there's always the other people who are just curious. And
Yeah.
they're just always wanting to know more. But checking in with yourself, like, do you normally just normalize everything based on your own experiences? Do you think you're weird compared to everyone else? Or are you that person who's kind of neutral and just exploring?
Yeah. And she talked a lot about, it was the somatosensory cortex map, right? And what you enjoy and how that,
Hmm.
and it's back to that context, how that fits into your belief system around sex and whether it may enables you to enjoy that. And so you got to find out what those beliefs are, address them so that you can rewire them. And it's back to that body positivity component. Love your body and appreciate where you are and enjoy that. And then if you want to go somewhere else, figure out the path to that.
Yeah, I know one thing that I did. I started exploring like all these women that I found attractive. Like I thought they were beautiful, right? And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, she's beautiful and she's bigger than me, or she's beautiful and she's skinnier to me. And I think that's a normal reaction when you're younger, right? Like you're comparing and judging. And that's just where our brain goes. And I started realizing more and more the connections. I was like, well, I find women beautiful when they take care of themselves, when they're trying. Like that's what I know miss my commonality was. I was like, they were dressing up regardless of their size. It was the confidence that I was
Mm.
really finding beautiful. And so I was like, okay, well, for me, like, am I just like dressing confident? And so I started looking at what I was associating with other people and then started doing that for myself. So
That's super
sometimes,
insightful.
right, like there's different ways to explore your own journey and starting to find yourself beautiful, starting to find yourself attractive. Like be who you want to be instead of just who you are.
I love that, Izzy. Gosh, that's fantastic.
Thanks.
Um, yeah, because you can shift and change, and we all do that as we go through life, right? The 25-year-old me is, I don't find that attractive anymore. You
Yeah.
know, it's not what I want to look like or who I want to be. And it's interesting that you say that and looking at other people because I have done that, and what I always found is back to the same thing you did is the confidence,
Hmm.
and how do they carry off their confidence? And sometimes it's they don't care so much about their appearance because they're just so confident in who they are and how they um, interact and how they treat other people. And it's whatever you feel is true to you. That to me is what is so confident and
Yeah.
is it's attractive.
And that's been one of my goals for this year. I was like, I feel like I've gotten kind of in my comfort zone, and I'm like, this year I'm bringing my sexy back. I'm like, I don't, we'll figure out what that looks like for me, but I like when I look in the mirror, I want to be like, oh yeah, she looks great.
I love that. I'm bringing sexy back. Uh-oh, wrong way. Uh, okay, I thought it's that was the last takeaway for this book. I mean, were there any other takeaways anybody else wanted to share that weren't brought up? Any other
Yeah.
thoughts?
Or just thoughts. Whether you've read the book or haven't read the book, like that's a big thing for us is like come to the book study, like listen in, tune in. It might make you want to read the book, or at least you walk away with some key bullet points that you can talk about in a conversation. So no reading necessary, but recommended.
Yeah. And thank you for that, Izzy. And I will say for anybody, I know somebody in the chat was talking about trauma. I did feel like she addressed that very well in the book. So if it that is something that you're struggling with and you feel like you want to try to move past it and rewire those mindsets and biases around that and deal with your emotions, I do think she did address it very well. And I think the workbook addresses it really well too. I thought it would be fun to kind of just end with these questions, Izzy, because at the end of the day, I felt like these are the questions you should ask yourself, whether you've read the book or not. You've heard the conversation, so you know what the questions mean. And when we talk about accelerators and brakes and the context of your daily life, and moments of self-doubt or shame and the kindness piece of it, and watering your garden, what do these look like for you? So I think it's worthwhile to spend a little bit of time for each of us thinking about these things. And you know what? Well, I was thinking about the watering my garden component here and encouraging its unique bloom for me personally. And one of the things that you shared, Izzy, one of the things I want to do is to um, say yes more, right? And
Hmm.
not, I'm busy, I've got some other things to go do. I want to say yes more. And in looking at those accelerators and brakes, it's giving myself some time to rest, right? And take a little nap. That seems real important for me to get a little bit more sleep. And so I've practicing some self-kindness on the weekends by taking a little nap on Sundays and
Hmm.
gar taking out some time for some self-care. And I found it has really helped throughout the whole week with the say yes process.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I find the like making sure that we have time to do things where we're touching, we're snuggling, but there's no expectations. I think
Hmm.
that really that creates that safety. And I don't know about you all, but women, we can feel when there's, hey, I'm going to do the dishes because they want something, or it's doing dishes because they genuinely want to help. And so also being aware of like you might be picking up on some of the other things and noticing that you get to choose your perspective of well, look, they're helping me regardless. Or you can choose to be like, well, no, I'm not going to do that because of this. So, like, also checking your own. And I've had to do that plenty of times where I'm
Mm,
like, I'm like, well, they didn't take the garbage out fast enough, or when they were supposed to. And so then I'm becoming bitter and then therefore I'm not turned on. So,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
also checking in with ourselves and being more playful. I had read a really great quote forever ago, and it was like, what if you could see your partner with a fresh perspective, without all of the baggage that comes along with it, without the thing they did 5 years ago or
Mm,
all of that? Like, what if you could see them like you were first meeting them? Because, right, like we often have a very different perspective when we first start dating someone. But like, what if you could see them through those eyes again?
yeah, that's great. I really like that thought. Yeah, and I guess just to kind of end the conversation, the thing I take away from this is that mind body connection, and when you're not feeling turned on, you're not interested in it, and you're not enjoying the moment of it, where is your mind? It's not, it's somewhere else, or is it here in the present? And are you being present? If I'm not being present, why? And should I just go take care of that so then I could come back and enjoy it? So step back, understand where that mind body connection is for you, and ask the questions of yourself that need to be asked so that you can move forward. I think that's my key takeaway. Izzy, do you have anything you
Yeah.
want to add?
Well, I want to piggyback on what Tammy put in the comments was, if you're not with someone and you're learning to love yourself, I took another course. I'm always taking courses on something, and
You are.
I am. And it was this great, like, learning how to be in pleasure with yourself. And so it was really about that allowing, and it was a really beautiful course, and I really recommend that. Like, just being able to feel sexy by yourself and having that self time is super important in developing that relationship with yourself, and also just your sexual experience as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Anybody else have any last minute things they want to share? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody's comments. Thank you for participating, Tammy and Marilyn. And I know Shannon was on here a few minutes ago. So we enjoyed having
Thank
the
you.
input today. Yes, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time. So back to my nap comment, it's the brain at rest.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. I was like, and I'm really looking forward to this next book. There's so much more and more research that's coming to light about the need to rest, and it's overshadowing all of those who learned how to work in the 90s, where it was like, work more, less sleep, rest is for the weak. Like, it's really going, no, no, no. Science is showing that's not the thing. That's what's really working, that we really do need rest.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'm interested to see the research on that and the impacts that it has on your brain. And so we'll all have a good nap before then and sleep well. Remember to pay attention to your sleep, and we'll understand why that's so important next month.
Yep.
I had a question. Do you guys meet in between the meetings to review the books, or is it just the main ones that you do the new book each time?
Yep.
It's just the ones each month.
Okay, just wanted
If
to check.
there's something, Tammy, that if you want to have a conversation, I am a serious book geek, so I love these conversations. Please reach out anytime.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you.
you. All right, I think we'll call it here, Izzy. Goodbye,
All right.
everyone. See you next month.
Bye.